Hello ladies and gents, I'm returning to this strange little format here of doing this video because this is going to be quite lengthy, and obviously you can see over here we're dealing with quite quite a big article that I wanted to run through today. And normally what I would do is take out very key bits of information, discuss them, pull them away, I take out quotes when I put them on the screen, remove them, that sort of thing. But this is way too big to do that with. And it's a very interesting report with some good graphs and things like that. And kudos to Variety as well. I'm almost shocked that Variety have done this. So apologies for the return to this format. I don't like doing this format that much. I don't like just reading articles, right? I did that for a while. I don't like doing it anymore at all. But rather than just doing a live stream on this, I thought we'd sit down and actually discuss it. Because it is fascinating. And obviously, just the title alone, why Hollywood movies are being squeezed out in China and what happens next. Now, this was actually posted on the 25th of August, and it completely went past me. I didn't even realise this had been posted. So, yeah, we're going to dive into this today. This video is not sponsored by anyone in particular, but you can, support the channel. We've got memberships, we've got Patreon, and I do have a second channel, all of which you can find in the description box. Head on over and subscribe and support, do whatever. Also got a PO box as well, by the way. Send stuff. But let's dive into this, right? Now, we all know Hollywood has a penchant for pandering to China at the moment. We know that. We know Disney even thanked Chinese officials for allowing them to film near the Xinjiang province, where they have Uyghur Muslim internment camps. That's not controversial. It's been stated in parliaments across the world. In the UK Parliament, it's been condemned. So, I don't know what YouTube's policies allow on stuff like that, but I mean, in the UK, if our parliamentary officials, our government, are saying that China has Uyghur Muslim internment camps, I'm going to run with that, because I'm from the UK. And obviously all information and evidence points to that. So it's not a surprise that Hollywood's been pandering to China. We know that, we've seen it, and they do it because it's such a massive market. But it's being pulled out. China is pushing Hollywood out of China, basically. And not really surprising, is it? You have two completely different ideologies going on there. You've got the Chinese Communist Party. Communism, it's not as much as young kids and things like that have started to try to popularize communism, because they have. I mean, they have, right? That's not, everything's communist, blah, blah, blah. It's not what I'm saying. But as much as younger kids and, people on certain political spectrums are trying to popularize communism nowadays, it's not really, it doesn't gel with the Western world. It just doesn't. We've had democracy and, I guess, sort of a capitalist system for so long now, it's not going to work. They're two different values. Two completely different values. So let's dive into this, shall we? Now, as a bit of background, this is really important. So Hollywood's film industry, such as XXX, Warcraft and Resident Evil, used to be largely sustained by their box office performance in China. And that was the same, actually, I believe, for the Transformers franchise. And obviously, they started to fall out. There are very specific films which will reshoot very specific scenes just for the Chinese market because they want that money. Again, Disney's Avengers, they shot a few endings, actually. I think Iron Man 2 had an ending shot very specifically for a Chinese market, where Chinese surgeons were working on Tony Stark. You're like, okay, sure, whatever. If that's what you want to do, no worries. But again, it's just transparent, isn't it? But a lot of these terrible movies, like XXX, it's not a great movie. It's of its time and things like that. I know lots of people hate me, but whatever. Warcraft, not particularly great movie. Resident Evil, again, they're not particularly great movies. But China market loves them, or did anyway. And they are the ones which basically guaranteed sequels. And now they say, obviously, which significantly exceeded their North American hauls and drove global grosses. Frequently, Hollywood titles would dominate the Chinese box office charts during most weeks, which is true. But I think that they have a rule of only 3 or 5 Western movies being approved for the Chinese market a year, if I remember rightly. But then they say this, but in recent years the tide has been turning. In 2018, Hollywood topped the local box office over 25 weekends, closely followed by Chinese-made Winners, which conquered 22 weekends. Now, so that's 2018, now the studios are struggling for traction in what has become the world's single largest theatrical market. And it is, but if the market's closed to you anyway, it doesn't matter. You know, you adjust your budget to suit the markets which you are capable of entering, and then you can change the profit. This is the problem, is they've been chasing the Chinese market for so bloody long. Again, it's one of the reasons that the budgets have just inflated so much, along with many other factors, FYI, but that is one of the reasons, because they're like, well, we can get, you know, another $200-300 million from this one market, so why wouldn't we pour another $50 million into this movie? Because we can, you know, earn that straight back. But if they're closed off to it, as seemingly evidenced here, that seems to be what's happening now, more and more, then hopefully that will remove part of the budgetary inflation that's been going on, which I actually don't see as a bad thing at all. I see it as a massively, massively positive thing. Now, they say this, though, in the first 8 months of 2021, Hollywood titles have been chart toppers on just 8 occasions, driven by an aging Fast and the Furious franchise, and over 2 weeks by a re-released Avatar. Hollywood's share of the Chinese box office market in 2021 has collapsed to a shocking 9.5%, according to data from consultancy Artisan Gateway. That's a massive drop-off. Only 9.5%. That's huge. And I guess maybe I was wrong. They say, you know, only 8 occasions chart toppers. So maybe I am wrong on the amount of Western movies that they can release, but I'm fairly certain that there is only a certain amount each year that can be allowed to be released in China. That's approved. But anyway, so this year there were only 2 US pictures in China's top 15 rankings. In contrast, the top 2 films at the global box office so far this year are China's Hi Mom on 822 million and The Detective Chinatown 3 on 686 million, ahead of Fast 9, The Fast Saga, with 681 million. And you can see it here. Again, they have some great graphs here. This is why I wanted to show you the actual, well, the whole thing. And you can see it, you know, China, domestic, other territories. I don't want to click on it too much because, you know, annoying. But you can see that, I mean, there's not that much being pulled from the Chinese market these days. You know, outside of Godzilla vs. Kong, which pulled 188.7 million, and Fast 9 pulling 214.4 million, there's not that much. I mean, what, 66.6 million for Tenet? It's not that much, is it really? 39.1 million for A Quiet Place Part 2. There's basically it's nothing. It's nothing at all. And then there's other movies which you'd think would be allowed to be approved in China. Shang-Chi, for starters, not allowed anymore. There you go. Shocking, really. COVID aside, this year would have been a difficult time for import films and Hollywood in particular, says Artisan Gateway principal Rance Powell. The Chinese films that have been popular have become very popular and on top by quite some distance. But it wasn't always this way. The modern-day Chinese film industry is still relatively young and grew up alongside a Hollywood market share that reached 50% in some years. 9.5%, quite a big drop-off from 50, isn't it? Let's be honest. However, the government has done its best to keep US titles in check. A system of import controls exercises quota allocations, blackout periods, often cordon off 3 or 4 prime seasons per year for Chinese language film releases, and the use of a censorship approval system diminishes pre-release marketing to just a few weeks. That's a lot. There hasn't been a single significant Hollywood release in China since A Quiet Place Part 2 on May 28th and Luca on August 20th. Meanwhile, Disney Marvel titles haven't been released in China since Avengers Endgame in April 2019. In fact, Black Widow still remains without a release permit in China, even though Disney have been pandering to the CCP. And I guess that, again, that's the crux of the matter, isn't it? You know, you're trying to pander to someone, a territory that, sure, makes lots of money for you, but it's unsustainable because you start pandering to them, they think they have control, and you still have to please the other world markets, where your film's released, so it doesn't really make any sense. It is an unsustainable approach. Since the pandemic struck, the supply of Hollywood movies in China has been thin and sharply out of sync with China's V-shaped economic recovery, which started in mid-2020. Industry sources have told Variety that revenue share quota slots remain available, an almost unprecedented situation. In a late July filing, IMAX China indicated that audiences have returned to Chinese theatres, and particularly IMAX theatres, in numbers approximating pre-pandemic attendance levels, but they are for Chinese language films and a handful of Hollywood films that were available. The delay of certain Hollywood film release dates impacted IMAX's Hollywood film box office, reads the filing. Now, they say this, though. However, the release hiatus, combined with the studio's experimentation with day and date theatrical streaming releases, has caused all US summer titles to be heavily pirated. The week 5 million debut of Luca is a prime example. However, this is what it really comes down to. The changing local taste drives support for Chinese fare. Just as concerning from a Hollywood point of view have been changes in audience structure and taste. It's widely believed that as Chinese exhibitors have built theatres in smaller towns and cities, they have addressed a more local market and diluted the population that's likely to watch foreign movies. At the same time, Chinese movie making has become more sophisticated, more blockbuster driven and backed by bigger budgets. Prodded by central government, mainland Chinese filmmakers have reached into previously off-limit genres. That means Hollywood is no longer the only purveyor of well-packaged action and sci-fi movies or franchises built around other forms of proven IP such as comics, TV or streaming series and games. Concurrently, China's main melody titles, nationalistic fare that emphasises socialist values, so again, we're talking about the values thing, this is why it's important, have also raised their game, flooding out from private sector studios and employing established filmmakers. Many are premium productions with stars and stellar production values that deliver real audience appeal. Ultimately, whether or not Hollywood's recent troubles are COVID-related or more systemic, US studios have struggled to participate in the rebound that got underway in July 2020 after China's cinemas had been closed for 5.5 months. The recovery accelerated in September when cinema capacity restrictions were eased from 50 to 75% and China became the first theatrical market to reach operational normality, according to UK-based researcher Gower Street and Analytics. Activity was sustained at a high level until June 2021, when attendance levels began to fall noticeably short of 2019 levels, due in part to dwindling Hollywood fare, an oversaturation of political movies and movie theatre restrictions. Again, politics will impact the next chapter. It's unsustainable. It just can't maintain itself. What happens next depends on a series of political factors. The unusually long summer blackout period could be stretched until after the October 1 National Day festivities that would have the effect of squeezing any remaining Hollywood films into the last 3 months of the year. Movies that may be at risk, including The Eternals, directed by Chloe Zhao. Apparently, that's not happening anyway. Like, that's not released in China. Look, China was like, yeah, no, she's a traitor. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, where Disney may not have done enough to diffuse charges of racism. It's not being released, is it? Space Jam: A New Legacy, because American basketball continues to be a sensitive subject following an NBA official's 2019 comments on Hong Kong, and also the fact that China is massively racist. They have openly racist comments in like cafes and stuff, like no blacks allowed and stuff like this. Like, people seem to forget this. Why a bunch of Chinese? Why do you think it's going to be allowed, regardless of the Chinese population? But do you actually think that the Chinese Communist Party is going to allow Space Jam, where he's called the King, King and Prince? They're going to allow that to be shown in China? Are you high? Come on, behave. And Top Gun, which is seen as promoting the US military. Even despite, ladies and gents, Top Gun changing elements of the film to try to get into the Chinese market. It is so funny. I really do hope this proves to Hollywood that you just need to suck it up, just drop the budgets and stop trying to get into China. God damn. Anyway, they say, they blame this. The political standoff between China and the US is already gummed up. film industry negotiations. Now there's a possibility that in a tit-for-tat move, following US moves against ZTE, TikTok and Huawei, China may be deliberately hobbling one of America's biggest export industries. Several seemingly uncontroversial Hollywood titles are without release approvals, and that includes Jungle Cruise and The Suicide Squad. Sci-fi spectacular Dune has the advantage of being backed by the Wanda-owned Legendary Entertainment, which is China. But some online commentators are still cool about its prospects. Possibly the most complicated calculation is whether policy or economics will guide the Chinese government's thinking about the film industry through the last third of the year. I mean, they've been well known. The thing is, ladies and gents, what people don't realise, the CCP's been well known just for like shutting down billionaires. Oh, you're a Chinese billionaire? No, you can't have money. Like, God, they're not going to care. They don't care about economics. I mean, they care about economics as a nation, as a government, you know, as a party, as a regime, but they don't care about economics when it comes to individual people. So yeah, it'll be policy driven. Oh my God, so funny. Regulators will have to decide whether to help China's cinema chains by allowing more Hollywood imports, or whether in this politically sensitive year the US should be kept at bay, even if that means a box office stumble. Such a scenario would in turn raise new questions in Hollywood. If China becomes an unreliable partner, why would Chinese factors need to be taken into consideration at the greenlight stage? It shouldn't. What are you doing? It shouldn't be considered. It shouldn't be considered. Ideologically opposed. Stop considering them. Stop it. Start promoting more Western values. There's nothing wrong with Western values. Start promoting that. Start considering that. You know, family structure, things like this. So I just thought it would make a very interesting video. It definitely seems to me, ladies and gents, that we're at this sort of crossroads moment where you've got China, I guess, also Jasper cameo. We're just at this crossroad moment where China keeps pushing out Hollywood, and maybe Hollywood will finally wise up and just go, yeah, no, we should. Because part of what the problem is that no movies have risks taken on them anymore, right? The only movies being put into production nowadays, generally speaking, are sure wins. What in the eyes of the studio? Oh, it's a sure win. It's a sure win. Let's just do that. And it's because the budgets get too high, because the part of it is, well, we need to make this much money back, and we know we can make this much money back because we'll get approved here, we'll get approved here. Oh, in China, we'll get approved in China. You remove that market, you'll knock the budgets down. People will take more risks, right? Because the budgets aren't so high. It's easier to make the money back. I genuinely hope this is a bit of a wake-up call. But let me know what you think. I just thought it was fascinating to go into. And I think what I find most fascinating about this, right, is that mainstream media like Variety are reporting on it. Because that's when you know there's a shift. In my eyes, that's when you know there's a shift. And they did it. It's the same with the Johnny Depp reports on Amber Heard and him making wins. It's in the language. When the mainstream media starts reporting on these things and the language being used, that's when you know there's a shift. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down below. If you're new here, do hit subscribe. Love to have you here for longer. It's the end of the video, so you clearly enjoyed it. So stick around for more in future. Now, if you want to support the channel further, Patreon, memberships, loads of stuff down below in the description box, as well as a PO box. Cheers though. Take care.